Okay, I think we're going to start-ish, right? We're a few minutes early, but I know there's people like pounding at the doors to come in, so I definitely just want to make sure that we get going with everybody. But honestly, thank you all for being here. It is the last session of a conference, and so I know how long that can, like how long these days can be, so thank you so much for actually staying for the end of this. I honestly very much appreciate it. I'm Rachel Levy. I'm an engineer at Google working as a data specialist in the North Central region on the cloud team. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about data as a cultural competency. And what that means is like cultural competency as a concept where people with different sets of backgrounds, beliefs, ideas, and cultures can come together and still communicate effectively, and using data as sort of that single thread that ties all of these pieces together across an enterprise that enables innovation. So we know technology is super embedded in our lives now. It used to be what I would call kind of the used car sales pitch, right? You would say, my computer can help you get something cheaper, faster, stronger, better, but never actually like exponentially better. And today what we see a lot of is technology like much more embedded in our lives, counting steps. Even our refrigerators and our washing machines are connected to the internet, which is really crazy to think about because today there's now so much more data generated than it used to be, and we've heard that all the time. But we also expect so much more from our technology. We expect that we have Amazon Dash buttons that we can just hit when we're out of like dishwasher detergent or something like, and it has to work. You only have one chance to sort of make technology work when you're working with an end user or a customer. So not only is technology not just sort of a really like a brute force, I can do it better, faster, stronger, but it's actually something that is adding value to your customers. So we also know that it's evolving and it's incredibly complex. The integrations is open as technology is today with open source. It is also exponentially more difficult to get it and get all the pieces talking together. So an example of what I like to use is in the, people don't actually think of the printing press as technology, but encyclopedias couldn't exist without this printing press technology that at the time was a huge like leap, right? Because before the printing press, the reading had to be like sort of inscribed, and it was really only for the elite and the people that could afford the information. And what the printing press did is it enabled the democratization of information, and then comes, companies out of that. So if you think of Encyclopedia Britannica and where they are today, sadly, they're like not a company anymore because they did not actually realize that just being, set in their ways is good enough. So what I'm suggesting is that like the status quo is going to be one of the riskiest, most like harmful things you can do to your business. And you really want to be innovating because lo and behold, the Wikipedias of the world will come around and they will disrupt the industry that you're in. And so having a culture that like promotes innovation is going to help you stay relevant in your industry, lest you sort of end up a little bit like the Encyclopedia Britannicas of the world. But conversely, not a lot of people know this. Nintendo actually started as a card company, like playing cards, back in the 1800s. It is a 130-year-old company, but they really value change. It's the only constant in their culture. It's the only constant in their enterprise. So when the printing press was all the rage, they had playing cards. But come along in the 90s, and they had gaming consoles, which I don't know a lot about, but I do know that like lots of people played them, and they were super relevant. And Nintendo was not like committed to just being a playing card company. They were committed to being an entertainment and game company in whatever form that took. And then in the new era nowadays, they come out with augmented reality. This, compared to Encyclopedia Britannica, are two companies that really have like juxtaposing positions on the innovation and how it finds itself in the culture. So this is just like one of those standard slides in every presentation. There's a ton of freaking data everywhere, right? Like, and it's growing. The like data sphere is enormous, and it's infinity, and it's 100 billion million times bigger than it was like last week or something. We just know that there's a ton of data, and because of the devices like your washing machine, your cell phone, your cars, the data is getting generated faster than ever before. So there's lots of data, but what's really interesting right now is that data is actually breaking one of the most fundamental rules of economics and the law of supply and demand. Because usually when you have a large amount of something, its value goes down, right? Not the scarcity, but with data, where this is like a huge turn, is that the more data you have, the exponentially more valuable it becomes. So there's something really important that like the quantity of data is like there, and it becomes more valuable when you can integrate it, contextualize it, and have people analyze it. So also, I don't really know how many bytes is in a zettabyte, but it looks like a lot of freaking data is coming. So it's like, be ready, get lots of storage. Like, but this again is nothing new, right? Like data, if you like going back to my high school and college days, I took Latin a lot, and I actually, when I started studying data in my master's program, I have a background in creative writing, so I didn't actually learn about data until way later. Like data, I always assumed came from the Latin root word meaning datum, which is thing, but actually preparing for this, I looked it up, and it comes from a different word. It's like datum as a noun, or as a verb, which means it is given, which is like, it is understood that. So in that context, data is like this information that lets you believe it is understood. So when you think about navigation and the stars and maps, that is all data. And like when you think of an image or a sound, that is all data. It's about making that information, like I guess Google phrase, making that information usable universally, right? And searchable. So finding the way to take like that sort of raw information and turn it usable is nothing new. It just like it's about how we do it and how we get the value from it today. So I talk to a lot of customers, and what I hear a lot is like, oh, okay, so we're going to do this on-prem, and we're going to do, you know, this in our private cloud. Oh, and do you do a data lake or a data warehouse? Short answer: we should all make data lake houses. Just kidding. Please give me that one. Thank you. I have a lot more puns coming, so if you guys aren't laughing now, it's going to be a really long, like 45 minutes. And then people have their Hadoop workloads, and they have, you know, different data sources. They have IoT, and like companies are really like concerned about collecting, storing, analyzing. They don't really know what to do. So a lot of my job is helping customers and companies sort of see the value in their data, regardless of the technology. Yes, I technically work at Google Cloud, but I am more committed to like the pursuit of data and its like righteousness rather than like the actual technology. Because at the end of the day, technology is irrelevant if you're not deriving value and action from the information that's in the data. And that's about doing that responsibly and truthfully. So like we see, like, I don't know if anybody is in consulting, but it's the year of what I'm calling the year of the digital transformation. Everybody is transforming digitally, and it's also the year of the partnership. So everybody is looking for a partnership, and everybody is looking to transform digitally. And it's really hard, and that's a lot to ask of companies, right? Like, if you look at these, a lot of the companies in Michigan and in the Midwest are really, really old companies, and it's like, it's really important to partner with a company like a Google, like an Amazon, any of them that really embrace the idea of change as a constant in your business, and that sort of cultural piece of that like everybody can understand data and everybody can be a data person. That's no longer means that you just have to know, like, be the world's greatest sequelizer. No, okay, I will get there. You will find one of my puns amazing. Like, so you have, like, you don't have to be a great sequelizer. You don't have to know Python to do machine learning. Like, a lot of what we promote at Google is about the democratization of AI and ML. Because if you go all the way back to the printing press and prior to that, like information was reserved in little fiefdoms for the elite. And like when you do that in an enterprise, you're not really driving innovation. So I think what's really important is that regardless of which way you're trying to evolve your business or your information or yourself, it's like be confident in that change and realize that like disruption is going to continue to happen. So even when you think that you've finished changing, like the next wave is coming, quantum computing is coming, like no one is going to be able to stay on top of all of the technology, but sort of embracing that unknown and embracing the fact that you're not going to know makes that like a lot more comfortable. And also know that like people like me, Google engineers, have no idea anything about quantum computing. So we're all in this kind of space together of knowing that disruption is coming, but we don't really know how. So when I think about like evolving and changing and that sort of culture around it, I think of the three pieces, right? You have trans, you have form, and you have mation, where like trans is about like that sort of cultural piece. It's about that changing and embracing that. Form is about that business. What form does your business take today? And I go back time and time again to that Nintendo example where I think of Nintendo as the augmented reality because I didn't play video games as a kid, so I didn't know that like much about Nintendo then. But like to think back to the fact that that was a playing card company is so like outrageous to me that like that company can still feel really young and feel really vibrant, even though it is 130 years old. And then the Asian piece where you sort of have that process and technology coming together to make something, like build a result. So in all of this, there's kind of four key pieces around innovation, which would be like embracing people as part of your company to help guide that change and be a part of it, embracing the newness, scale your business and your technology together so that you don't have the business or the technology sort of competing, but you actually have each other as partners. And when in doubt, lead with cloud because we have a lot of freaking compute and a lot of storage. So if you like, I go back to when I started at Google, I learned that we can launch in 12 seconds 20,000 VMs, which is like, oh my gosh, that is a lot of VMs and that is a really short amount of time. And then I'd go work with customers on Hadoop issues and they'd be like, oh, well, we can't run that because we don't have enough computer. The marketing people are taking all the compute to run this analysis. And I'd be like, wow, like that is like a really humbling moment because I'm like, oh, well, if I can just spin up 20,000 virtual machines. And it's like the constraint of your infrastructure should no longer be the constraint of your organization. Because when you like unlock the value of like the infinite capacity of cloud, you start to only be constrained by the capacity of the human brain. And I think that is much larger than all of the compute in the world. Like the imagination, the creativity, and the people that go along with innovation becomes like the key and central part, which is why one of the other things I talk a lot about is what I'll call like the Centaur Model of machine learning and innovation, where you have the head of a human and the power of a machine or a computer or a horse, right? Like I hear a lot of fear around AI taking my job, automation, but with innovation, it can't happen without people. And like taking the best of humans and augmenting it with the best of a computer, like really creates a powerful force that is like much stronger than the sum of its parts. So when we think about innovation, we think about the people who apply the processes and use the technology to generate value from data. That all of these pieces sort of work together and to like influence the culture. And then back at that way, the culture then influences those pieces. So culture really sits in the middle of all of this, where like the innovation can connect, and it's allowed to come from anywhere in your business, especially as somebody who doesn't have a computer science degree. I find it really special that like having tools to meet end users where they're at so that you can use like GUI-based things to build machine learning models or AI, or use chatbots to help like design, a conversation is so powerful that like I really like advocate for people learning basically the bare minimum of technology in order to create what they have in their minds, because I think that like having that openness and that culture becomes incredibly important. So the other thing about culture in an organization, especially coming from Google, I can say we take our culture super seriously. And like I don't know if anyone was at the GFS talk yesterday, but we do wear shorts to work and pants, and we also do have like dogs running around our office like crazy. So like those types of cultural pieces are actually really core to Google's sort of imagination and magic. So what we suggest is that culture can be a compounding problem or a compounding solution. If you have some like innovation needs in your business, like culture is going to be the reason you can or cannot achieve those and meet those goals. So technology, after all, is amazing, but imagine how far it can go with a culture to match. And that's coming from McKinsey and why data culture matters. And that really, to me, makes me think of when I first started at Google. We have BigQuery, which is like the only product I'll mention because I don't generally bring up products, but BigQuery is our data warehouse, and someone said, here, see how fast you can scan a petabyte of data. And I'm like, okay, this is like literally my first week of work. And I like write a SQL query, select star, whatever, and it turns out that was a $5,000 query. That's, I guess, initiation they do to new CEs. But that ran in like under a minute. And that idea that like data can be processed so quickly becomes incredibly important when you want to start to generate insight from that. So strong data culture has transformative effects, and it can solve both ordinary and extraordinary business problems. And I say that because as somebody who speaks to a ton of enterprises and customers, a lot of questions I ask will be, oh, can we do AI? And I'm like, sure, we can all do AI. I don't know what that means, but we're all going to do it. And I'm like, let's talk about your data quality and your reporting. How are you doing your metrics today? They're like, this is a quote, I think we can leapfrog basic reporting. We're really interested in AI. And I'm like, oh my word, okay. Data is just the raw bits that make up the information, which makes up the insight, which makes up the action that is activated. Like the actual outcome of data is is only as relevant as the action you can take from it. So whether the problem is as simple as a recommendation engine or as like complicated as building a chatbot that can diagnose you medically, like what's really important is that you start with a strong data foundation in that and realize that you can it builds on itself. Some other ways we see this working is that you can help find, acquire, and retain customers. And I would also second that with talent. Actually, a lot of companies I work with in the Midwest have asked me, how does Google attract talent? Like, we're looking for data scientists. Like, how can I get that? And I think that actually what I would suggest is, maybe this is a little circuitous or meta, but I would say use data science to find those people. Use some network analysis, but also use data and that culture to attract the people that you think would really benefit from having that culture. You can also use this sort of innovation and transformation for like delivering exceptional results, like the standard business operation optimization, and then additionally disrupt new markets or competitors. So I see this a lot. I work with some manufacturing companies in the food space who we've talked about creating data science businesses within their practice to start to do commodity trading as an opportunity around we have the African swine flu right now, and the price of pork is going up significantly. And how can they start to actually plan accordingly when producing their own meat products, that they're doing today? So where we see and where we partner a lot is with companies that are looking for that sort of accelerated business transformation and like data culture, right? So before we do anything when working with customers is we kind of have 4 guiding principles, and that would be operating with trust, democratizing insights, increasing business agility, and then applying intelligence. So with that, like, operate with trust. And this is true with a human to human, person to person, family, friend, any type of partnership. Like, trust is everything. Without that, you have nothing, right? So this also applies back to that same cultural piece where when you're granting people access to data, it should be people only get access to the data they need for their jobs, but you have to trust that when they ask for that they're going to use that data respectfully and appropriately. And when they breach that trust, that you start to take the steps to correct that. So operating with trust is, can I protect my data? Can I trace the lineage? This is very important in highly regulated industries, especially healthcare, financial services. And then is the infrastructure reliable enough for my mission critical apps? And this is just a standard. When your app is down, when your website is down, you are not operating as a business, you are losing money. So making sure that you have a technology partner, that you have that trust with the history of success, whether it's with you, with your peers, and that you trust that what they say they're doing and how they're going to partner with you is honest and fair. So this is one of our favorite go-to sort of customer references, is like HSBC, one of the largest banks in the world, has like migrated a lot of their operational workloads to Google Cloud. And they do a lot of their analysis around liquidity positions as well as financial fraud detection on Google. And something that previously took them 10 hours now takes 30 minutes. And they're getting identifying financial crimes 10 times faster with BigQuery. And while that data itself about the company is super interesting, what I'd suggest is what has that now enabled them to do as a business is much more important. That if they can identify 10 times faster financial crime, they can start to stop it 10 times faster. They can protect your money or your credit card better. And they can also avoid losing money in that. So while the data itself and what they're doing is really awesome and super advanced, it's also has a really big impact on their bottom line and to their customers, which is truly who they're serving. And then there's stuff around democratizing data insights. And I've mentioned this a few times today. This is really about the idea that information belongs to the enterprise and to the people that you work with. And there are a ton of times that I see people feel like they're job protecting by having their own little data puddle. No, okay, so they have a data puddle on their desktop where they'll just make a bunch of Excel spreadsheets and versions of something, and they won't share that back. And I'm like, okay, there is a short-term job security in protecting your little small amount of information that you have in your business and how you do sales, but you are much more impactful and much more valuable to your own business if you actually provide that to a larger audience across your business. So this is where we see the democratization of insights and meeting users where they're at to be incredibly important. So delivering that insight fast and foster that data collaboration at scale without compromising security. I do a lot of work with streaming data and getting, when an action occurs in the real world and data is recorded about that, if there is an activation that needs to come from that, whether it's financial fraud, whether it's identifying something that's down on the factory floor, it's important that you can act in real time and you're doing that at scale. So building with scale in mind and collaborating with your teams becomes a huge piece of this. And you have sort of this idea of self-service analytics that I'm talking to a lot of customers about. And what that does is that allows people to really be sort of collaborative in what they're doing and share it back to the enterprise. So you have a ton of different roles. Again, when people say, oh, I'm looking for machine learning people, I'm like, oh, okay, are you looking for engineers? Are you looking for data scientists? Are you looking for data engineers, developers, end users, business analysts? I think these phrases get thrown around a lot, but what's really important as a business is to provide each of these roles with the tools they need to provide impact back to your business and foster like that collaborative environment. So something we take a lot of pride in at Google is that we actually don't require any of our developers to code in any specific language. A lot of people do Java more so than and Python, and some people are getting into Go. But none of it is like not allowed. It's just about like meeting end users where they're at and providing like the opportunity for people to work in the way that they're most effective. So where we see this, and like one of the cool uses where we see a non-technical person being able to like leverage technology is in this solution. Again, I said I'd only mention one product, but there is one other one in here, and this is AutoML, which is it's essentially pre-trained models for computer vision, where like I don't know if anyone's ever used Google Photos, but if you ever use Google Photos and you can identify, oh, this is my dog, or pictures of mountains, pictures of sunsets, that's all computer vision, where it's like reading the image and actually labeling it for you. So Bloom is a Midwestern company that makes a ton of different hinges for like doors, cabinets, and they were having problems on the factory line actually identifying, because they have so many unique hinges, like which hinge was part of which cabinet set. And using this, they would have people take pictures, and it would then, within 5 weeks at peak accuracy, 91% chance tell you, oh, it's part of like this product line, to help them sort of sort that and go faster. So that was not built by engineers in the IT department. That was built by people on the factory floor that had a really good understanding of this, but wanted to spread and make a bigger impact with their own sort of information and identification skills. Increased business agility. So this we're seeing a lot like in how like we're trying to simplify things, and this is honestly very important for somebody, again, like me, who does not have a super technical background. So like, can I write Python code? Yes. Can I like do all these things? Sure, but I'm not super great at it. And like what I appreciate is that like I'm no longer in charge of also managing my infrastructure to do that. So we have like more of a platform opportunity where I'm sharing and working collaboratively with my teammates, which like minimizes the complexity in environment so that you're spending less time sort of like tweaking and tuning, and like what I perhaps pejoratively refer to as like knob turning, versus doing something like a lot more impactful for your business, so that you can take what you know really well and share it, like do something that's more about activating action rather than just like making something run a little bit better. And where we see this happening is one of our customers, Bayer. This is their crop science department. They're the third largest agriculture innovation company in the country. And so they're like doing a lot of, instead of planting seeds that they're doing cross genetics on, they're actually using Google Cloud to predict infer how the seeds are going to connect with each other. And like I think of like the Honeycrisp apples, there's a new apple out there called the Cosmic Crisp, which is they've used to sort of predict what the qualities of that apple will be prior to actually having to go through a whole plant cycle. So they can say, oh, with like X% like confidence, we feel that this is actually going to make a good apple, versus, oh, okay, we went through an entire crop cycle. Turns out these apples suck, and that whole year was a waste. So starting to do like a little bit of prediction and inference on a custom-built tool using that sort of power of the cloud. And then finally, we want to bring data and AI into the context of everyday businesses with ease. So a lot of people don't realize that like there's a ton of machine learning that goes into Google Maps or Google Gmail, like in the amount of, actually I'm not going to make up the statistic, but there's some ridiculous number of how many hours are saved weekly by people using Smart Compose on their emails, like, and just how much like faster people are working. And it's supposed to feel very seamless, right? Where it's like it's injecting the intelligence into your applications and into your workflows so that you're not, so it doesn't feel like super laborious or super like full, like effortful just to get something to be slightly easier. So I think about the types of tools we have and how we actually are like sort of customizing those for everyone from like a business analyst to a data scientist and giving people the opportunity to work in any like sort of lane that they feel works best for them. So we have a ton, like again, customers that are using this. We have another factory floor identification, and we have now actually found a real use for Google Glass. We actually now have customers in a factory or on using that for the identification with models built into the images that are into the lens. And we've partnered with healthcare organizations to like not just make their data better, but actually like perhaps it's like a little bit self-serving and like kind of like makes us think too heroically about ourselves, but it's like literally saving lives. And I think when you transition from, oh, I do data, or when I talk Gordon Food Services a bit, like they're literally feeding people. Like that's so much more important than doing data, right? And it's like actually taking that meaning of what you're doing and the insight and realizing that it becomes a lot more important than just like your day-to-day interaction. So that is like pretty much what I have to talk about. I have a few minutes, I think, for questions, but yeah, does anybody have anything? Absolutely. Any questions? No? I'm going to say because it's the end of the day, right? Okay, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it becomes compounding, right? Where like being able to sort of have that like multiplier effect from each walkie-talkie or each phone becomes significantly more valuable than just the phone itself. And I think that's where we see like the sharing of intelligence across an enterprise becomes super important. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and actually one of the products I'm working on with the product managers is the explainability API. So I think a lot of people think of machine learning and what it is, sort of a black box, right? But how can you actually understand which pieces, which inputs are most valuable becomes important, because I go back to a ton of examples in my head where I think if you throw enough data at something, that's great, right? You'll get better insights. But if you throw enough institutionalized data that has implicit problems in it, such as like institutionalized racism or institutionalized sexism, like you're actually you're going to end up perpetuating that. And I see that a lot when I was working on a model for a company where they asked to do predictive policing. And the first thing I thought is like, oh, that sounds cool. It'll help make the city safer, right? I'm from Chicago, so parts of the city are like a little bit dodgier than others. But when I started working with my team on this, what I realized is like, actually, that is a terrible, terrible thing, because like it's not as simple as just throwing police at a problem, right? You have to be really intentional about what that actually means for society and what that is. So where I found having like, sort of going to your point of like what the implications are, I found a different problem in the data is that when working with policing data, in 74% of crimes in Chicago, an arrest is made or not made. So that means in only 26% of the times that somebody reports a crime to the police, somebody is arrested, which is like really scary to me, because that number actually goes down with murders and homicide in Chicago. So there's even less. And I think like using data to solve that problem becomes a lot more important than trying to say predictive policing, where you start to like reinforce patterns. So like in sort of a roundabout way, I think the other thing I promote is actually processes and organizations that mitigate that issue, because with great data comes great responsibility. And where I promote that is like, if you are deploying a model to production, it's actually gone through a governance process where people can validate that not only are your results statistically significant, but they're actually meaningful and not sort of, it's really easy to hack a p-value in research. Like if you research, is marijuana bad for you? What does the science say? Like half the sides will put out information saying, yeah, like it's really bad for you. Here's all the information and data that backs it up. And the other half will put out all the information. It's like, oh, here's all the benefits of marijuana, right? But it's a super polarizing issue, and you'll never really get to like the bottom of it, because there's too many sides like trying to promote their ideas. So finding like a really neutral cross-company or cross like industry collaborative council to help promote that is where I see, like I help companies come up with processes where it's like, you cannot deploy your model to production until it's been validated, the quality of the data has been validated, and like you actually have like done testing around what the implications of the results are, and not just kind of blindly following the data, because that is where you start to get into a ton of trouble. I don't know if that answered your question, but that was just a lot of information. Yep. Yeah, and especially, but like where I promote that is like enablement over governance, right? So like data scientists should and can have their own sandboxes where they can do whatever they want. They can bring in external data, but that is not a production environment, and that is not a place where a model can go and run rampant in the wild. That's a place where you can build, imagine, understand, and then take it and test it before put it into production. I think that becomes like key, that you have people in your organization that understand the implications of what's being built and like how you've proven that it's actually safe and better for the world than not. Anybody else?
What's the governance model look like that would not become just a roadblock? How do you?
Yes. I know. Right. So when I like my first week at Google, I claimed I'm going to make data governance sexy again. It has not happened. No one likes data governance. So the first step is rebranding. So we're going to call it agile data operations going forward. It's way cooler than data governance. But what I see, like I say, is having places where people aren't blocked from especially data scientists, right, where we know that they can potentially use data more responsibly and understand bringing in different columns and tables and having really true sandboxes where that is like firewalled off and that they can do that in those environments. But like governance is really, like you have security built into the technology for column level ACLs or row level, like any kind of granular access control, and that's built in so when people query the data, they're only getting data that they have the right to see. PII is safe and all of that good stuff. But then like before like anything, like that means literally nothing in a sandbox. That sandbox is worth nothing until it's been validated. I kind of call it like blessing it as kosher before it's really used across the business. So you can share, you can explore, but you like cannot make business decisions or push things to production without going through a console. But that doesn't mean that you can't work on it, right? So it's like finding that balance of like working on things for production environments versus like exploring and which stuff needs to be more highly governed and finding a balance where like that happens. But it's a lot harder said than done, which is why we're onto agile data operations, like away from data governance. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's some stuff with differential security policies where like you can do scrambling and encryption, so everything that like you can protect PII columns, and you see that a lot with like credit card numbers, personal like names, and then it's all encrypted in each record level with different encryption keys. So that like when the key is kept by a model essentially, so that like it's secure in that way. And then there is also an analysis you can do on your data, or like it's like differential. Does anyone know about like differential security stuff? I'm not a huge expert, but I know there's a ton of models that'll also assess the risk, and like when you run your data, it'll tell you like the predictability of each of these columns, and then you can start to like design your databases more appropriately. Like maybe you have an ontology of your data where it's like, okay, this is PII data, right? So like it is locked down, it's in its own table, nobody can access it, but like it has unique identifiers that if somebody in HR needs to join on it or something, they can do that. So I see that is a huge problem in general, right? Like that's like security is the utmost importance with data, because without security you lose your trust, and without the trust you have nothing. So I'm not a security expert, but I do see that like I schedule a lot of calls with our security team between companies and that, because I know that is on like the forefront of everybody's mind. Awesome, then I think we are just about at time, but thank you so much, and I'm around for literally like 10 more minutes if anybody has any other questions, so thank you.